It's 6:03, so let's get going. Thank you all for coming again. If in the last two or three sessions I had this illusion that we would stop having these sessions anytime soon, that illusion is no longer with me, let's put it that way. Very strange how the Houthis have managed to turn things on their head around here. Um, and of course, the hostage is the second issue, which is probably worse, but put that aside for 2 seconds because theoretically we have control over the hostage situation. We don't have control over the Houthis. So in any case, um, we'll start with the Houthis because it's on everybody's mind, at least here, more than anything else, because they don't allow us to put it off our minds. Although we've had in Tel Aviv, we had 2 straight nights of sleeping through the night. It's like I'm back to the days of having babies in the house and worrying about getting up in the middle of the night. I fear for my couple of my friends, colleagues who have babies in the house who have to get up both for the babies and both for the Houthis. People who um, have safe rooms in their houses are just sleeping in their safe rooms. That sort of makes it kind of easy. On the other hand, we don't have a safe room in the house. We have a bomb shelter in the basement of the building, which is more protective than a safe house would be. But of course, it requires getting up in the middle of the night and making it down 2 flights of stairs with the dog and making sure we're all out, etc., etc. I have to say, when you get up for a baby in the middle of the night, you don't have to get dressed at all. But unfortunately for this, you got to get dressed at least enough so you can be out with your neighbors in the middle of the night in the shelter. And so it's nothing compared to what people have gone through. Let's really don't feel sorry for me or all the millions of people in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Um, but if it goes on for a month or two, I'm not sure what I'll have to say to you because I don't know what the effect will be of this going on for a month or two. It clearly can. It clearly can because there's very little we can do about the Houthis. That's part of the problem. As someone has said, how do you bomb someone back to the Stone Age when they're already living in the Stone Age? And it's very much the case. And the Houthis have played this card very, very well. Think about it. What happened? Um, First of all, they're a minority in Yemen, but they're a very violent minority and they're a well-armed minority, and they managed to fight the government of Yemen to a standstill. And they managed to stop the government of Saudi Arabia, who was siding with the government, and stop them from attacking the Houthis. Why? Because the world put pressure on Saudi Arabia because, oh, the poor Houthis, it's a poor country. It's a very, very poor country. There's no question about it. Um, and when you're bombing the Houthis, you're bombing the poor people of Yemen. There's a problem, I agree. But whose responsibility is that? And does the rest of the world have to pay for the fact that there's a crazy government in Yemen? I mean, when I say the rest of the world, I am talking about the rest of the world because I'm sure everyone sitting on this call is probably paying a few percentage more on a lot of things that you buy because instead of moving through the Suez Canal, all cargo is having to move around the Horn of Africa, adding 2 weeks to transit between the Far East and Europe, and to eastern U.S. ports as well. So it's having an impact on the whole world, and there's very little one can do. We can keep on bombing, and we'll be successful in bombing, and nothing's going to stop us. But it's a question of how many targets we have. One of the key successes, and if you sure read the New York Times article today, I'll link to it in today's update about the intelligence successes. It's not the first time that's been written about, but the fact of the matter is that Israel had thousands of targets to hit when the war with Lebanon started. In 2006, there were like 200 targets, and they finished the 200 targets, and then it was now what? And they were trying to hit various things, but this war we had thousands of targets. They were all planned in advance, and so every Air Force pilot was trained on X number of targets, and he knew when the time came, the order came, he could hit these and that targets with the proper armaments and everything else that was required. The Houthis, I don't think anyone in the Israeli intelligence establishment paid much attention before October 6th, October 7th, excuse me. And after that, there were a lot of bigger priorities. No one thought that we'd be in a war with the Houthis, and it's not easy. Our best bet with the Houthis is hoping that the Saudi Arabians have good intelligence on them and that we can, use their intelligence services to gain more information about the Houthis in terms of targets, in terms of all these sort of things. But even so, our brilliant defense minister said we're going to move towards decapitation attacks. In other words, killing the leadership of the Houthis. Well, you know what? It's possible to kill the leadership of Hezbollah if you have a plane hovering near the border and it can get to Beirut in a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the maximum, and do a bombing raid on a particular target. The Houthis are 2 hours at the best flying time from the Air Force bases in southern Israel. They have to, in order to get there and get back, you have to have tanker aircraft that goes with them. It's considerably slower than the full speed that the fighter aircraft can go. It's a major undertaking. So doing decapitating attacks is going to be very, very difficult. Unfortunately, we don't have any pilots that have completed training on landing on aircraft carriers. If we could land on one of the U.S. aircraft carriers down there, that would make things a lot easier, but don't have we don't have planes that land on aircraft carriers. We don't have pilots that know how to do that, and that's a whole specialized technique that only a few air forces or a few navies, to be more exact, in the world know how to do, and mostly it's the United States these days. Are the only people who really know how to do it. So attacking the Houthis will go on. We'll keep on attacking them, and they'll keep on lobbing missiles at us. It's not clear. No one has any idea how many missiles the Houthis have. If we work together with the Americans, we probably can cut off their supply. There's no reason they should be able to sneak any, missiles are not small, even if you're putting them together, assembling them inside the Houthi land, or inside Yemen, the Houthi part. It's not going to be easy. We need to have a full cutoff from the Houthis of anything. But then comes the question, but you're cutting off any food for the Houthis, for the people of Yemen. Where's the morality? And I don't have an answer, frankly. I really don't have an answer. Would it have been, going back in history to the questions we didn't do, the roads not taken, would it have been more moral on our part at the beginning of the war to say, okay, we're not going in, we're just turning off all the electricity, all the water, and all the food. Nothing's going into Gaza until our hostages come back. We're not going to bomb. We're not going to kill anybody. We're just not going to allow anything in. Give back the hostages, we'll open up the gates. Don't give back the hostages, everyone will do whatever they can do. We're not letting anything in. This is now a siege. You created a siege. Would that have been a more moral choice to make? I don't know. I think so. I think less people would have been killed, probably. We would have destroyed less of Gaza. Maybe we would have gotten back the hostages. I don't know. But the world would have screamed. How can you do that? Poor civilians, innocent civilians. Not an easy. There's nothing easy about war. There's nothing easy about war when the other side plays with civilian populations the way they have. And no easy solutions. No easy solutions with the Houthis either. Whatever we're going to do to put pressure on the Houthis, innocent Yemenites are going to suffer, and some are probably going to die. On the other hand, Lavdil, but still, how many innocent, and there were innocent Germans, how many innocent Germans died in Dresden? How many innocent Germans died in all the bombings in Germany? How about the Japanese? Fire bombings of Tokyo, of all the main cities of Japan were firebombed. We're only talking about the atomic bomb for the moment. War is a terrible thing. And anyone who thinks that war can be sterile and everything else is fooling themselves, quite honestly. Now, which doesn't mean, don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing a better job dealing with civilian casualties, that mistakes aren't being made. I have lots of different criticisms and things that could be done differently. But when everything is said and done, and whatever can be done to limit civilian casualties, which I think we could probably do more of, people have to understand the fact that when there's a war, civilians are going to die, especially among the weaker side, and especially if the weaker side uses civilians as a tool. That's just the unfortunate reality. And I don't have any good solutions. I have no good solutions for the Houthis. I don't think attacking Iran is the good solution. um, because it's not at all clear how much the Houthis listen to the Iranians. It's generally the sense that they are their own crazy people. They are more crazy than anyone else in the region. They're more extreme. They're extreme extremists. It makes the Ayatollah remain in Iran look liberal compared to the Houthis because they're and so will attacking Iran have any impact? I think the only way to have impact is cutting them off from Iranian supplies completely. Any no planes, no ships, nothing can come in. But then what do you do with to feed the people? But then whose responsibility is that? I don't know. I don't have a solution. Um, and again, it has to be said two other things. Look, the first two rockets that started this round, the ones that were not intercepted, caused catastrophic damage. Thankfully, they landed in two places where they didn't kill people. First one landed on an empty school because in the middle of the night. There were buildings all around that. If it would have landed on any one of the buildings, it would have flattened the apartment buildings. People in safe houses probably would not have survived. Safe rooms would not have survived. The second one that landed in Jaffa by accident landed in the middle of a playground, which was between all these buildings. So the only thing that happened was tremendous, damage from the explosive power. The explosive power that created a sound wave. It broke windows and everything else. But the actual explosion took place in the middle of a park. Again, if it would have hit one of those buildings, dozens of people or more would have been killed. So the fact that the next five have been intercepted, we can't assume that every one of them is going to be intercepted. Some won't get through, and we won't be as lucky that they'll hit empty playgrounds or empty schools, and one of these will hit and kill a lot of people, or potentially kill a lot of people. So it can't be ignored. The psychological impact certainly can't be ignored. There was, I think I wrote about it, this ridiculous article in, I forgot it was the Marker or one of the Hebrew newspapers where the headline was, "The reason Houthis are hitting in the middle of the night." And I was, oh, crap, maybe there's something with the radar, maybe there's something with the weather, or maybe there's something. No. And so they knew they could bother us by hitting in the middle of the night. I've said to my son all along during this whole war, why would the Hezbollah just shoot us in the middle of the night? It would drive us crazy. Well, they didn't. They like sleeping, but I guess the Houthis don't like sleeping either, so they've learned our weak spot, hitting us in the middle of the night. And by the way, it's not, when they hit us in the middle of the night, 2 nights ago, Thursday night when they hit, 17 people had to be hospitalized from falls and whatever else, running to the shelter. The first time in the middle of the night, I hurt myself a little bit. I mean, not to go to the hospital or anything, but get from deep sleep to running to a shelter from hearing, air raid sirens, people fall, and all sorts of things. So, anyway, that's the Houthis for the moment. They will unfortunately keep my title day whatever of the war. I was going to do that anyway until all the hostages are back, but it seems like the war is continuing for an unknown period of time, and hopefully, hopefully something will happen. Now, at first they said if we stop firing on Gaza, they would stop. Now they no longer say that. They said they will stop firing if we eliminate the blockade on Gaza, and so that's never going to happen. So therein lies real problem. Okay, let's go to the other next topic, which is very problematic, and that's the hostages. It's not looking good. There's a fear that the current round of negotiations will fall apart because Israel is now demanding what would seem to be a reasonable demand, which is a list of all of the hostages that are going to be released or alive in this first humanitarian group. Hamas is claiming that the original deal that Israel presented back in the spring called for a list to be given after 7 days. Hamas claims it needs those 7 days to find out where everybody is and who's alive and who's not. I don't know if that's true or not, but we we might blow up these negotiations because we don't have a list, which is another way of saying uh, that Netanyahu may not want a deal and is pulling back from the deal because he doesn't want to deal with the consequences of the deal. Um, there are very few people in this country, except his biggest loyalists, who who are supporting his position relating to that. I mean, the government people are all, parroting his line, etc. But public opinion is 75-25 against his position. 75% of the population would be happy to end the war at this point in return for getting back the hostages. Uh, the argument is that we can't end the war and leave Hamas in power. In a perfect world, that's absolutely correct. But since we did nothing in a year and 2 months to replace Hamas, then what do we think? It's going to be the virgin birth of a new government somehow. It'll suddenly be someone else in power because we want it. I mean, it's an absurd position to take at this point. It's logical. We don't want Hamas in power, but I don't think we have much choice at this point. One of the things that this government, most Israelis now, I think, accept, but took a long time to accept the fact that effectively we lost at least part of this war the day they took the hostages. It's obviously turned out much better than we could have expected because of what's taken place in Lebanon and in Syria, which has changed the balance of power and changed our strategic situation considerably. But in terms of Gaza, the moment they took the hostages, we in a very difficult position. We've continued to be in a difficult position. If we're willing to give up on the lives of all these hostages, which this government seems to be willing to do, then we can eventually choke Hamas, maybe. I don't know, over the next couple of 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half. I don't know. I don't know how long there'll be still hostages alive. What it'll leave behind in terms of a scar on this country, I don't want to think about. How we can look at, I had a hard enough time. I was the day I guess it was the first Saturday after the war started, so a week into the war. The first hostage family, it was actually one guy whose wife and 3 kids had been taken. Went in front of the Ministry of Defense a few blocks from my home and put down a chair there and said he's sitting there and protesting until they bring back his family. And I went over and spoke to him. Other people did. At the beginning, there were, a couple dozen of us there to support him. What can you say to a guy like that, right? And now his family thankfully came back because they were part of the initial exchange. But now you're talking to parents. You're talking to parents of girls, women, whatever you want to define, an 18, 19-year-old who's been kidnapped by Hamas over a year ago. And we're seeing some of the reports that came out of what they were doing with the little kids before they were released and some of the young women. One cannot imagine what these women are being put through. Jews have not been put through this sort of situation since the Holocaust. And yet we seem incapable of paying the price it'll take in order to get these people back. And it's only a political price. One of the biggest fallacies that goes on in this country right now is, well, we can't let another October 7th occur again. Well, of course we can't let another October 7th come again. But October 7th there were 2 parties to October 7th. There was Hamas, who planned it and would kill all of us if it could. And I have no question that if Hamas got to Tel Aviv, it would kill anyone they could find. They will kill anyone they find if they could. However, the reason they haven't gotten to Tel Aviv yet, or anywhere else since they were founded in the late 1980s, is because we have an army that defends ourselves, defends our borders. We have a Shin Bet that goes in and finds their cells, arrests people, stops them most times. Sometimes they manage to get through and successfully pull off a terror attack. But by and large, they don't. October 7th should never have happened. If there would have been soldiers ready on the border, there would have been 3,000 dead Hamas people on that day. And maybe we would have lost 5 or 10 soldiers in a battle. Maybe 20 soldiers we would have lost in the battle, but that would be it. They would have lost all their attacking force if our army had been ready for them that day. We will never again have this kind of mistake. Something else will happen, I guarantee you, in 30, 40, 50 years. we once, when we all be here, and we won't all be here, but well, may the country all be here, etc. Um, there'll be another set of mistakes, another intelligence failure. There are always intelligence failures, but hopefully we'll have learned from this lesson, and for the next foreseeable future, we will never make a mistake like this. And so Hamas will be in Gaza. Big deal. It's not worth the 50 lives that are still unaccounted for, especially since these aren't 50 people who went somewhere where we recommended they don't go, a country where we put a warning, don't travel to this country because it's dangerous. No, they were sitting at home in their homes inside of Israel, where there were soldiers who were put into a base that, based on the latest reports, was considered inside a death zone that could easily be overrun, and people knew it could easily be overrun. And over the years, we didn't do anything to change its location, even though there were plans to change location. Like everything else that happens here often, it's mañana, machar. We'll get to this problem machar because we have more pressing problems. Like, whatever political problems are pressing at the moment, as far as things of that nature. So we have an absolute responsibility to get these people back. Um, there is no reasonable price. When I say reasonable price, I mean giving up of prisoners and ending the war that we should not pay. We captured just yesterday 240 prisoners. So we give up 1,000 prisoners to get these people back. 2,000 prisoners. What difference does it make? Our prisons are full. We're not arresting people who are suspicious in the West Bank at the moment because our prisons are full. There's some other problem with our prisons being full, and that's a whole other discussion. But the matter is, our prisons are full. We can easily give up some of these people. Some of them in Brit jail for 20 or 30 years. You know what? There aren't that many 60-year-old terrorists who commit terror attacks in their 60s. Their children might, their grandchildren might, but they're not about to commit terrorist acts. Men in their 60s or 70s at this point who've been in prison for 30 years, even if they did heinous things in their youth. So, I'm 100% in favor of um, any deal that we can do. Um, anyway, that's Gaza and that's the prisoners. Lebanon, the ceasefire is holding. I would say we're pushing the envelope on a rather continuous basis. Are people not hearing me? Can someone put your thumbs up if you're hearing me? Yeah, okay. I saw something in the chat. Let me get a little closer to the. Okay. Okay. So let's okay, sorry. Okay, so Lebanon. So we're pushing the line, the gray zone, in terms of uh what we're doing. Before the ceasefire went into effect, I remember an interview with one of the military correspondents, and it was asked, well, can we continue to destroy Hezbollah material once the ceasefire goes into effect? And his answer was no. But we've continued to do it. And we've continued to search in the areas that we're holding for additional material, for additional tunnels, and we're doing it in a systematic way. There's various discussions of us not being out in 60 days, but that's more dependent upon whether whether the Lebanese army takes over the positions that they're supposed to take over. We'll have to see. We're acting like we can do whatever we wish at this point, which is mostly true. But I think we will probably pull out on the 60th day, assuming the Lebanese army takes its locations. Hezbollah is very weak in Lebanon itself politically. We need to hope that the Lebanese people take control of their own lives and change things for the better in Lebanon, change the future of Lebanon. That would be the best outcome for all of us, but I don't really know. It's a very complicated place. That would be the understatement. The interesting thing is today they picked someone to be the deputy head of Hezbollah. Until now, these people have been either religious figures or military people. And they picked a politician, someone who's been involved in the Lebanese parliament for many years. So they realize that politically they need a lot of work to be done politically for Hezbollah in Lebanon to maintain its position in Lebanon. So we'll have to see what happens there. Syria. I think we're making a mistake in Syria. not by what we're doing, but what we're not doing. Now, I don't know everything. Maybe the Mossad is quietly doing things that I don't know about in terms of offering support to the Syrian government. But I think we should be publicly outstretching our hands instead of saying we're sure these guys are going to become terrorists or they're going to be a threat. Maybe they will. And certainly in terms of any sort of medium-term planning on our part, we need to assume there's a chance that these people are not going to be friendlies towards us and that they could potentially open up another border and another set of difficult situations. However, that being said, we don't want to have self-fulfilling prophecies. We don't want to say because we think they may become that therefore we're going to take an attitude that's much more problematic towards them, um, keep on attacking them. Instead, we should be offering them help. We should offer them help, right? Whether it's food aid, whether it's some sort of other aid, we should be saying, welcome. We're more than happy to. We want friendly relations. What do you need? How can we help you? Worst case, they say no. Worst case, it undermines them. Worst case, we spend a couple of $1 million worth of aid of some kind or another to buy goodwill that ends up being wasted. But why not? What is there to lose to take that sort of risk? I see nothing to be lost. Nothing, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It may be a complete waste. Like I said, try it. Do something different. Everybody's not an enemy automatically. They may become enemies. I mean, if I was a betting man, I would say this chance at least 60-40 that they'll end up being our enemies. But at 60-40, that still leaves 40% that they might not be our enemies. And if they ended up not being our enemies, that would be so good that it's worth making a little effort to try to make that happen. So, one of our biggest problems, besides all the terrible things this government has brought us, is uh, a lack of vision. A lack of vision. Netanyahu once had vision to some extent. His vision mostly seems to be related to staying in power now. Staying healthy, obviously, he'll be undergoing an operation any moment now. It should be minor, and hopefully be back at work in a couple of days. But what he doesn't seem to have is any vision of where he wants to take us going forward. So we'll have to see. One thing that I think is important to know domestically, I see these articles in the American papers that Netanyahu is strengthening, he's gotten back into the groove, etc. Just not true. I'll publish a survey tonight that's like a survey of surveys. It goes back over 9 months or so, and it shows that he went up a little bit. Now he's back down. Um, he's probably almost the lowest he's been, except for right after the war, it's the beginning of the war itself. So he's not back in the groove. Um, and if it was elections, he'd be out of power very quickly. There's no question about it at this point, at least at the moment. We've been surprised in the past. Two last subjects. One, Iran. All this talk that here's our golden opportunity to hit Iran. And some levels, there's some truth to that. However, the only problem is what are we trying to achieve? Because there are two goals to be achieved in Iran. One is to eliminate the nuclear program, and two is to bring about regime change. Now, the problem with eliminating the nuclear program is the nuclear program is spread out over lots and lots of locations, lots and lots of places. Even 5 years ago, the sense was that if we attacked Iran, we would just put back that program by a year. Well, guess what? It's been since that time, 5, 6, 7 years. They haven't become nuclear until now, and so pushing them back a year back then would have been a catastrophe because all we would have done is given them a reason why they should attack us. Not that they need any reasons, it would seem, but um, so that's the question. If we attack now, what will we have accomplished? Can we stop their nuclear program by attacking now? The general sense is we cannot. Maybe we can, maybe things I don't know, but I think it'll be very, very difficult. Can we harm their economy? Yes. But what can better harm their economy, of course, would be massive sanctions brought on by the United States. Israelis are every other thing you hear is, well, when Trump comes to office, when Trump comes to office, when Trump comes to office. The more people understand the United States better basically say, We have no idea what it means when Trump comes to office when it comes to us. It's a big unknown. We have no idea. He may be wonderful for us. He could be terrible for us. There is no sense of knowing what his particular policies are going to be. He's surrounded by people who are very pro-Israel to people who are pretty much anti-Israel. Depending on who he speaks to in the last moment, will determine a lot of things. And he's by and large an isolationist, which is not good for Israel. So we'll have to see. Nothing is going to, events will determine what sort of impact he has on Israel. The last thing I want to talk about is domestically, and that's the one major thing that could bring down this government, and that's the issue of the ultra-Orthodox draft. Uh, it does not seem to be an easy solution. The ultra-Orthodox are not going to accept the minimum that the rest of the country will accept. I don't think Netanyahu has the political ability to push through a deal that will not get enough support, even amongst the Likudniks, even amongst the religious Zionists. Um, Too many of them think that the most important thing is keeping this government in power, but there's a certain line that even a few of them are not willing to cross. And one of them is exempting the ultra-Orthodox, because we all understand the fact that if this isn't changed soon, our long-term trends are not very positive, to say the least. So there is that sense that this is the one issue that may not be so, it may not lend itself to a solution, despite Bibi's best efforts to find one. I'm not sure there really is one. Okay, so we're now up to the question of the question section. So raise your hands virtually and try to call you. Steve. Steve, unmute yourself. Steve, you're muted. No.
Now?
Okay, so now we hear you. Go ahead. Speak up.
Okay. Now that you nor I are great fans of Netanyahu, I have difficulty saying Bibi. But what alternatives are there realistically? I mean, Naftali Bennett has some popularity. There are a lot of people who are against him because they feel that he sold them out originally when he was on a right-wing ticket. Certainly, Lapid wouldn't have the popularity. Gallant, I'm sure, hasn't. Could you suggest anybody who might be a viable alternative?
Eisenkot. I would say Eisenkot. If he could convinced for Gantz to step aside, I think Eisenkot has the ability. He has he has more popularity than Gantz does. He's Sephardi, which can bring about some additional sides of the who might not necessarily vote for someone else. He is unfortunately, no one can call him a far lefty. He's paid the ultimate price in this war, losing a son, losing two nephews. Um, he is nice, and I say that in a strange sort of way. And the reason I say he's nice is only in the sense that when my daughter was in the army, she had a job that put her in touch with a lot of high-ranking officers for, brief encounters type thing, walking with them to various places. He was the only one amongst the chiefs of staff and other high-ranking officers she worked with that stopped to ask about herself and seemed to care, who she was and everything else. Not something that Eisenkot have been known to throughout the army. And a lot of people know him in that way. So, is he the Great White Hope, for whatever, how you want to call it? I mean, look, Bibi is terrible. And he's terrible because no one believes him. No one in the world believes him. Trump doesn't believe him. No person going to come to an agreement with him. No political party really believes him. And he's stayed in office by putting people against each other. And leaving all that aside, in any normal place, this is there's enough years. Any place requires someone else to take over because you need someone new. So I think Eisenkot is a possibility. What will happen with Israeli politics, how it'll end up working its way out, I do not know. But frankly, any of the people you just mentioned, I'm not saying the electability, but I'll take Bennett, Lapid, I'll take Gantz, I'll take you name it practically over a list of people over Bibi at this point. Remember, there's two other problems with Bibi, which people don't even understand. Bibi does not run a government the way a government is supposed to be run. He doesn't meet with the Minister of Housing. He's the Prime Minister, right? Prime Minister is in charge of everything. Does he meet with the Ministry of the Minister of Housing to go over what his plans are and to see how they're standing up to the plans of the Ministry of Housing? Of course not. Does he sit together with the Minister of Health? Does he sit together with the Minister of Transport? How are we doing on the new train system or the new subway system or the new whatever it might be? I mean, I go across the board. He doesn't run the government the way people are supposed to run a government. He's a terrible administrator. It's a known fact. He is a terrible, terrible administrator. He does well when he has really good people who run his office. Bennett was very good. Avigdor Lieberman was very good in those early years. Gideon Sa'ar was good. In the early years, these people knew what they were doing. Now he has Sug Gimel, people running his office, and we see it. He is not a good administrator. And the prime minister in Israel is also the chief administrator, not in the same way the president is, but he's supposed to be in charge of everything else. So that's why we need somebody else who's competent at this point. And I don't think, Bibi may be the best speaker in the government or in the country, but I don't think he's the most competent person to be prime minister. Michael Ross.
Yeah. Is there any evidence that the Yemeni national government that was in a civil war might use the weakness being inflicted on the Houthis to restart any kind of...
Well, there's talk of that. There's talk about that. Whether that really will happen or not, I don't know. We should be working, again, I have no idea what our relations are with the Saudis under the table right now. I have to assume we have a mutual interest right now, to say the least. They certainly, they were very upset at the United States for pressuring them to stop the war against the Houthis. They certainly would like to see them gone. So how much we're able to get from them at the moment, I don't know. But we should be able to work with the Saudis, get some advanced arms into the national government of Yemen. The United States should be supplying the national government with Yemen directly. It's a government. It's officially recognized government. The United States can sell them arms, could train their troops. All those things need to be done. And yes, it was amazing to me to hear the UN, I'm not amazing because we're used to it, but the UN Secretary General calling on Israel to stop attacking the Houthis and stop expanding the war. We're expanding the war. I listened to NPR. I listened to the 7 o'clock news as a podcast the next morning every day. And I guess it was Friday night's broadcast where they talked about the Houthis responding to the Israeli attacks fired on Tel Aviv. The Houthis responding to Tel Aviv, to Israel's attacks, as if we started by attacking the Houthis? Really? But, it goes par for the course of what's happened in this war. We're not blameless for everything that's happened. There's nothing that, we're not perfect. We've done some stupid things. We've done some things that were wrong, probably. But the fact of the matter is, I'm just looking at the thing. It looks like there's announcement of additional soldiers that have died. At any rate, the fact of the matter is the world keeps on looking at this in a very strange way. We're always responsible, regardless of what we do, regardless of what our enemies do. Nancy.
Thanks. One of the people that was originally looked at as a potential defector within Likud was Avi Dichter, who I believe is now the agricultural minister. But he's a former Shin Bet head or something. He has a security background. I read over the weekend that he, in an interview with one of the TV stations this weekend, he came out in favor of a state commission of inquiry.
Yeah, he did. And by today, he walked it back.
Oh, okay. So that was
he has no backbone. The man is made of zero backbone. it's amazing to me how these people will just, look, Bibi does not want a state commission of inquiry. He wants no inquiry. Why? It's quite clear why he wants no inquiry, because any inquiry, we can argue percentage-wise, right? We can argue, military versus government, 60-40, 40, 50-50, 70-30. You can decide, you can have your own opinion, who's more responsible for October 7th. But clearly, he takes a significant amount of responsibility. I mean, he won't take responsibility, but a significant amount of the blame. Anybody who looks at the events that led to October 7th will have to say that the policies, the concepts that he had were wrong, and they brought us to that date. And not to mention the fact that, again, you remember the old saying of Truman, "The buck stops here." Well, there's no stopping the buck in Bibi land. It's always passed, a mirror to pass it back to whoever you can pass it back to. So the continued attempt is not to have a national commission of inquiry. These other ideas are really meant to create a situation where there is no inquiry at all, because there won't be an agreement politically on setting up a political appointees. So it's really all an attempt not to have this, which is absurd and insane. On the other hand, look, there was a National Committee of Inquiry on what happened in the Carmel fire, and in another place, he would have resigned because based on what the commission came up with, he was responsible for what took place to a greater or lesser degree. But what's personal responsibility in this country at this point? No one takes any. Anybody else? Claude.
Quick question. Who's the leader during the surgery, and when is he going under?
It's Yair Levin. He sort of divided it up. He divided between Yair Levin for the purposes of Levin, the justice minister, the worst person who started the judicial reform, quote unquote.
Tikva guy.
Yeah, the Tikva guy. And he divided it up, and he gave he for the purposes of cabinet meetings, and then it's Katz for the purposes of the small cabinet, the military, calling an immediate meeting of the military cabinet if there's a need for some sort of military action. He is so how should I put it? He won't appoint an assistant or deputy prime minister because he's afraid that someone will move, and then they'll say, "Oh, we can make him the prime minister." So he won't have anybody who could possibly be the prime minister. So he did that in this case as well, to make sure that it's divided up between the two. He's going under sometime around about now, theoretically. So it should be around now, be under for an hour and a half, and take that the way you will. So, anybody else? No. Okay. Going once. Any messages here I should answer?
Hi, Mark. It's Lisa.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I started to ask two unrelated questions. I know, a lot of times the things that you say are logical, and I was just wondering, I presume you say the same things during your radio and your TV appearances. Have they ever moved the needle?
No.
Okay.
Look, one of the frustrating things about having a column, appearing on TV, et cetera, is the knowledge that I have a 0.00001% impact on things that take place. So I have to assume that's why I give it 0.001%, because maybe I impact some people, and maybe some people will vote because of some small, no real impact.
Okay.
No real, especially with this government, not much of a chance. A different government, I have at least entry into some of the potential ministers. But again, look, what needs to be done on so many different levels is obvious to some people. It's not obvious to others. Gideon Saar got himself 150 million shekels budget for the ministry for Hasbara, which is a nice thing. Should give it all to Ilan Levy and let him run it. And he knows what he's doing at this point. Giving it to Gideon Saar is ridiculous. He's now looking for ideas how to spend his 150 million shekels. So, anyway, you had something else.
Oh, yeah, I was just asking, on the small child, on the infant who's part of the hostages, is the thought that the child is dead? And
So
what
the
were the
child, the
child's?
brother, and the mother are thought to be dead, but there's no proof that they're dead. In other words, there's been no intelligence that has shown them to be dead, but there's been no intelligence that's shown to be alive since almost the very beginning. So the assumption is they are dead. They were taken by some small group. None of the main groups are who took them, so maybe it's a slight chance they're being hidden away somewhere. But the general assumption is that they're dead. We're talking about the Bibas family. So the assumption is they're dead, I'm afraid. Look, the best case is that 50 hostages still alive. And that's the best case, I'm afraid. So when they come all back, hopefully there'll still be 50. It'll be a happy and a sad day, mixed together when that takes place. Anybody else? Okay. Michael, you're ringing. Go ahead. Go ahead, Michael Ross.
Well, just to say, if he is having a prostatectomy, I very much doubt he'll be capable of working for a week or two at least.
Well, yeah, listen, they're very, they make Trump look like he's giving up a lot of information about his health, what's been going on about the health of Bibi over the last year. Nothing is really ever announced. This whole thing, remember last Wednesday, the secret stories that he had gone to Cairo and gone to all these places. In the end, he was, took the pictures on top of Mount Hermon. But the other part of it was the pictures were pictures of him getting into a helicopter at Mount Scopus at Ein Kerem Hadassah. So what was he doing at Ein Kerem Hadassah? He went there for whatever pretests that they decided that he needed the surgery last week at Ein Kerem. So, but that was a secret. So they're very secretive. He obviously had some sort of heart incident last summer. We don't know exactly what it is to this day. But there is no official rule in Israel about releasing information about the health of the leaders. There's supposedly some sort of protocol that exists in one place, and then it's not even kept in the way it's supposed to be. So we'll see. I mean, he doesn't have to. I just read in the last hour or so the fact that he's not going to be coming to the United States for the inaugural of Trump, partly because of this. But I also understood it's partly because no other foreign leaders are coming, and it would be very awkward for him to be the only foreign leader at the inauguration. I think, thankfully, he's not going because I don't think it'd be good for Israel or the Jews if he came to the Trump inauguration. So he's not going, and so that's a good thing. Anyone else? Okay, well, I'm afraid we'll see each other all in 2 weeks. I should say that either today, or I'm not sure it'll run today or in a couple of days, but I've gotten one wonderful guest post from one of the readers. If people have ideas and things they want to put guest posts, I'm more than happy to include it. Quite honestly, after 450 days, it's getting, it's tiring to write it every day, and I'll keep on writing it every day, but additional guest posts would be nice to bring out some other opinions and some other perspectives, etc. So please, if you have things you'd like to say, let me know, and I'd love to include them, even if I don't agree with them, as long as they'll be posted as your ideas, not necessarily my ideas. So thank you, everybody, very much, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks.